What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Game Time with John Eads. We got another guest for you this week, Bryce Koon, though his real name is John. So John Koon, I guess. You probably haven't heard that since, like, kindergarten.
Well, my dad's name is John Koon.
So okay.
I could have been a junior, but they switched the middle name, so I go by Bryce, the middle name. But, there's not – we just were discussing this. There's not enough room for – John's – it's not like it's a common name, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's very rare – rare.
You don't hear it very
often. You don't
often.
hear the John.
It's not Koki.
It's not. That's true. That's true. And it's John.
Right.
So that's where we kind of sit in that company. No Jon. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, those guys are weird.
They're different breed.
I think, yeah.
So, yeah. But no, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for coming in. So your middle name, they changed it? You didn't want to –
Yeah,
you came out of the womb. You're like, I want to be my own
I actually
brand.
Said that. Yeah. I wanted to go ahead and set my NIL value then. Was looking ahead. But also,
Nico Iamaleava. I mean, let's not stray too far.
Yeah. Well done on the pronunciation.
Thank you.
There.
I am Aliva.
There you go.
I think I said it wrong. Yeah. We're getting off the rails already. This is great.
Yeah,
as y'all can tell, I mean, we got a pretty good rapport. Bryce and I, we've been at pretty much all the baseball games this year, and we talk a lot, we chat a lot, joke a lot. So wanted to have him on the show. He works for 24/7 Sports, kind of a big deal. Also Paramount, so he gets to fly a lot of places. I like to give him a lot of crap for that. Not a big driver, Bryce here. But if you got the budget, you may as well use it, I suppose. But in all seriousness, does a great job covering LSU football, a little bit of basketball here and there for Glenn West. I know you work with Glenn hand in hand, and then baseball as well. You actually did hop in the car for the weekend series here to the Plains, LSU at Auburn. Koki Riley and I were talking last week, kind of taking the temperature on the team, 34, however many games it was in. And I think the mood's a little bit different as we sit here on Monday than it was last week. What were your overall takeaways from LSU's 3-game series at Auburn, which was LSU's first time getting swept all year?
Yeah, I think it was also – saw some stats around Auburn's SID department saying it was like since the 80s.
88.
88.
Yeah.
So, yes. I mean, it's been a great year. Great year. Yeah, we'll take this off the rails quickly. No, but in all seriousness, no, I mean, look – I think one thing and just kind of talking with LSU fans on social media and talking to some fans in attendance this weekend, it was really one of those things where you kind of realize, like, hey, this team isn't perfect. Like, they're at their best, they can be really, really good, right? I mean, I think you've seen it going back to Frisco, and obviously, myself and Cookie have seen, like, this team has the intangibles and the tools to be an Omaha team. Now, like we all know with college baseball, once you get to Omaha, anything can happen, but you want to get there and see what happens. I think this weekend, though, was, a team in Auburn that I think for maybe LSU fans and maybe just kind of for SEC fans in general, they didn't really know who Auburn was, in terms of coming into the weekend. Like, you knew they had Sam Dutton, who pitched pretty well on Friday night against his former team. But you also kind of had some unknowns about that team. They were coming off a series win against their rival, Alabama. They back it up to now you have to sit there and say, I think the rankings came out this morning, and I think they're fifth or sixth in the country. One of the hottest teams in college baseball. So I think that when you look at what they've done over the past 2 weeks, not that LSU fans are ever going to be satisfied, and you shouldn't be satisfied with the results, but it can kind of make sense to where they're playing really good ball right now, and LSU isn't. And I think that, going back to the Oklahoma series and then going to Auburn, it also speaks to just how hard it is to win on the road. And I know a lot of fans, they want to call Alex Box the toughest place to play, and I would agree. On most nights, on any given night, that probably is one of the toughest places to play. But Auburn had a great atmosphere. The weather wasn't fantastic on Friday night. A cold rain. Yeah, it was interesting. Makes it hard to hit. But I think it just goes to show how hard it is to win. And Jay said that in his midweek presser and then kind of backed it up on Friday night when I asked him. He said, this is why, we don't take anything for granted. You can't go through this conference slate and say, okay, that series is a win. We've got a good chance here. You really don't know until you show up, and you have to take care of business. And LSU didn't. There were some things that they have to clean up. I think they are correctable mistakes because we've seen them, do those things well. But, I think Auburn's a good ball club, and I know that's tough to admit for the diehard LSU fans.
Well, Jay said it before the weekend. He thought that was an Omaha team. He said that about a couple different teams. And I feel like he doesn't just throw that out there lightly. I think he said that verbatim. I don't throw that out there lightly, that I think this is a great team. And it was on full display. The pitching was excellent. The offense was there every game for them. And they kind of made LSU look different than they have all year, certainly from an offensive standpoint. Like, they were kind of running circles on them from a game plan perspective, an X's and O's perspective, if you will. LSU just didn't look like itself. And it was surprising that they didn't figure it out sooner, because that's kind of been their calling card this
Yeah.
year. Is they have an off game, fine, they run it back and re-rack it the second time around. But they really just couldn't ever, to use this analogy that we've already used for the podcast as a whole, get the train back on the tracks.
Yeah, and I think, kind of what Jay said, that he doesn't say things. And I think it's one thing about Jay Johnson, like he's not going to say something just to say it in terms of the praise for another team. And so I think that when he talked about Auburn being an Omaha team, you kind of saw that, especially with what they had to do over the course of a weekend. Like if they play like they did in a regional, whether they're at home or on the road, that is a team that can go to Omaha. And so you talked about just the discomfort. I mentioned the weather on Friday night wasn't conducive to great hitting conditions, a wet, just a cold. It was a chilly day, chilly afternoon and evening. But like you said, they just never kind of responded. And you saw, I go back to Friday, and what was it, the ninth inning, they push across the run, the back-to-back doubles that kind of make it look better, if we'll say, make it look better. You're thinking, okay, if you would have just come through in some other situations, I think Koki tweeted this out, the runners in scoring position was abysmal on the weekend.
I think it was 148.
Yeah, it was rough. So, you kind of just look at that. They just never looked like themselves. And I believe you asked this question in Frisco, but this team, and maybe in other press conferences as well, they always respond, even within the game, right? Like they have a big fourth inning, the opposition does, and they come back in the bottom half of the inning and they put up 2 or 3 runs, and that never happened. Yeah. And I think when you're LSU and you're as talented as you are, sometimes maybe you can rely on that, and when they became a little too reliant on the ability to do that, that kind of hurt. And I don't know where you want to take it, but I think that the pitching wasn't necessarily as bad as people thought it was. I don't know. I think that Cade Anderson pitched well enough to win the game.
Yeah.
I think Anthony Ianson pitched well enough to win the game, and it kind of stunk that you didn't get to see Zach Cowan and Kason Evans to the final game of the series.
I'm with you. I think Cade has had better. You mentioned the weather.
Yeah.
That affected him a little bit, I feel like. But I feel like top to bottom, the pitching was good enough to win all of those games.
Yeah.
Like Ianson gave up 4. It seemed like it was a lot more than that because of the weight of the 2-run homer towards the end of his start. But LSU's put up more than 4. What were they averaging, like 10 per game or something like that?
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, you got 7 shutout innings from Cowan and Evans. And Shores didn't get off to an excellent start, but it was a 3-0 game like the whole day.
Yeah.
And the offense didn't do anything until late. They had opportunities. They had bases loaded early. 2 guys on with 1 outs, no outs, and they just couldn't get those guys across. So I think the pitching was good enough to win. The bullpen was a lot better. For whatever reason, the offense just didn't travel. And it's like that in baseball. Rarely do you ever put all 3 together at the same time on the same weekend. LSU's done it at times, but more so you have to win 3 different baseball games 3 different ways over the course of a series. And those games all were kind of the same, honestly.
Yeah, it was very felt like the same script, like different day, same movie type of thing. And I think specifically what you mentioned on Sunday, like when you get what you got out of Cowan and Evans, I don't think that Jay Johnson would have come into the weekend saying, okay, even if Shores does struggle and we get that, we're going to probably win the game.
Win that one.
You win that one, and the fact that you didn't, it's disappointing. And I think that to your point, they had plenty of opportunities. So if you are kind of, there's this LSU fan base, I love them because they're just so passionate, and there's different ends of the spectrum when we talk about these fans and how they view, through what lens they view this too. If you want to be optimistic and try to find a silver lining out of this weekend, which is hard. You mentioned the pitching was good. The bullpen looked pretty solid. I think one of the things is that it's not a team that's struggling to get on base. Like, they're getting there. It's just the small detail, which looms large when you put it on the magnifying glass, of being able to get that runner across or get them in and playing situational baseball, which that's the difference between a good team and an Omaha team, I think. And Auburn did that well. They torched some baseballs. And even going back to the Friday game and in the Saturday game to a certain extent, I feel like LSU put the bat on the ball, like you mentioned, just baseball. Sometimes you don't find the green grass, and that happens. And so it's a long season, and I think that, like you mentioned when talking with Koki, the week to week, especially in this conference, the emotions, it's going to be a roller coaster. Yeah. And you kind of have to just hope you're playing your best ball probably over the next 3 or 4 weeks heading into that SEC tournament.
I don't think you can ever overreact because Texas A&M has played awfully until now. Like they're getting hot.
6-9, I think, in the SEC, middle of the pack. So and that series is looking way more important.
I know.
So it's crazy. Yeah.
Like last year, of course, LSU was 3-12 to start, and they roared back. Right now, I wonder if almost they peaked early and now they're kind of coming back down to earth. But we'll find out. It certainly helps when you come back and play at home, and they've got Bama, Tennessee, back-to-back at home. Tough midweek game against McNeese coming up tomorrow on Tuesday, though. So a lot of tests ahead. A lot of us watched the game there on television, whatever it was. But you being there and going to the press conferences afterwards, talking to Jay, what about what he said Friday, Saturday, whatever it is, stuck out to you? Did you pick up anything on that?
I think the biggest thing, and I included it in the quote on the story on Friday night, and I think it's like we talked about the same theme all weekend, was
247sports.com, by the way.
There you go. You can check that out. Free, by the way. No subscription needed.
No VIP.
No VIP on that one. We got to keep it open for the people. So, but one of his quotes was, within a game, you see teams that, and I'm paraphrasing here, you see teams that they do all the small things correctly, and then you see a team that struggles with it. He said, we were the team that struggled with that. And I think that was just the theme of the weekend. And he wasn't happy about it, and I don't think he was necessarily I don't think the players were either, but it shows that this is not a overreacting theme of the team. It's just when you go on the road and you don't do the small things right. Like Friday night, for example, and this is not bagging on a kid because, I couldn't make the play. I don't think you could either. Tanner Reeves struggled a little bit at third base. Chris Stanfield, I had some people on our thread and on social media say, how did he not catch that ball that Ike Irish hit in center field? I was like, because it was 105 off the bat and he slammed it into the wall. Like, you have a true freshman in left field playing with a green monster of sorts, and he's got to get familiar with that. It's just when you don't have, I say all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, when you don't have that, it makes for it allows for inconsistencies to happen, and that happened at the weekend. And so I think that was just kind of his big thing, and then kind of going into Saturday and Sunday, it was just we just didn't take advantage. There's no massive secret. There's no secret sauce. We didn't execute. And I know fans don't love that, right? And even sometimes the media, we're like, we need a soundbite. We need something to go off of. But it really is, we had the opportunities. Like you said, we just didn't execute. And that was just kind of the theme. And so I think it really is it's a small change. They could very well – they welcome in McNeese this week. They obviously welcome in a really good Alabama team coming into Baton Rouge, and then Tennessee next week, which I think is your litmus test. Like, okay, who are you really? Are you the team that went to Oklahoma and blanked them and pitched phenomenally, or are you this team from Auburn that really couldn't find themselves over the course of a weekend? I tend to think, John, they're somewhere in the middle because they've probably shown that more consistently, and I think that's what Jay wants to get back to. And on Sunday, I would say Jay was like, let's just get home. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's just get home. We have to wipe this. We'll talk about it, but we've got to move on because in this conference, it's not for the faint of heart. I
feel like that was the same sentiment he probably echoed after the Texas series, right? Just, whatever, Saturday and Sunday were what they were. And then they responded with a nice string of wins there, right? They swept Mississippi State, and then they went and they swept Oklahoma. Yeah. So if that's going to be the response –
Tennessee
3 losses
Alabama.
for 6 wins, you'll take that. Yeah. So your concern level isn't very high?
Yeah, I'm a baseball guy. Like, that's kind of my background. And I think, though, we're so – and I say this all the time on our show and everything – I think as college football fanatics, which, whether or not you're bleeding purple and gold, you and I, we love college football, right? We get into the mindset of if you lose 1 or 2, your season might be over, pre-12-team playoff. And – I think sometimes that trickles into the other college athletics and baseball specifically. Baseball's a long season, and who you are right now is not who you're going to be, I believe, in May and June, hopefully. And so you have a chance to bounce back, and I think that's kind of the mentality. Baseball's a weird game like that. You mentioned LSU last year catching fire. I know Tiger fans don't want to hear this, but that year that Ole Miss won the title, they were, I'll be honest with you, I didn't have them in the NCAA tournament. They were the last team in, and then they go win the whole thing. So you don't know. You just want a chance. You want an opportunity. And LSU's a good enough team to where they're going to keep knocking on that door of opportunity. And, the law of averages, I say you always look at the back of the baseball card. This is going to be a good team. We'll see how far it goes. But like I said, I think they're somewhere in the middle between what we saw in Norman and then what we saw in Auburn.
I'm with you. So we'll see if they're kind of coming back down to earth, if that was the outlier in the Plains, whatever the case. Tough conference series coming up, but a lot of them at home. 7 straight games on the road is difficult, especially when you don't have bathrooms in the dugout.
Yeah, that was wild.
It was.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Did you experience that? Because you were down there in Thibodeau.
No, I went to the constructed bathrooms behind the Nichols dugout. But if you're Jared Jones, you're not going to walk from the opposite side of the diamond behind to those bathrooms.
I'm just glad they got it unlocked for him and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
That is just insane.
That's college-based, mid-major baseball at its fine. And that's not a shot. Like, that's not a shot. It's awesome. It's love. I mean, I've covered mid-major baseball, called games for mid-major baseball. I mean, that's that's why you love the sport, because it's different at every level. It's
like Maction on a Wednesday night, or Pac-12 after dark.
It's
just all these little shticks and things that happen. So that was maybe a warning sign, though, of what was to come for the weekend, because LSU kind of struggled with the same stuff against Nichols in that game and get swept. But Bryce, John, whatever your name is, he's saying don't panic that much. But if this becomes the trend, then we'll have to have a different discussion. Yeah. So that's LSU baseball. The Tigers still in a good spot, 10-5 in conference play. Usually you want to get to about 20 and you'd be a national seed, top 8, look good for the tournament. So they're already halfway there.
Yeah.
So got to stack some more wins. But, in a pretty good spot. As far as LSU football, there's 2 more spring practices. I know you were on the plane, so you weren't at LSU's fake spring game. I'm calling
event.
It. Yeah. I don't even know what. Extended practice on Saturday. Southern played an actual spring game that same day, which was very nice to see. Yeah.
Kudos to Southern.
My coworker Kevin got to go see that. I was jealous because those spring games are fun, man.
They are.
The old format.
Yeah.
But more of an open practice, more of what we've previously seen already. I guess as we sit here in mid-April, heading into the end of spring, what are your thoughts on what you've seen from the team based on what you've seen?
Brian Kelly had a comment, I believe it was heading into fall camp last year. It might have been spring ball, either one. But it was kind of talking about the construction of the roster, and he said, we don't have – I think he was just being real – we don't, Brian Thomas Jr. is not walking through that door. Malik Neighbors, Jaden, they're not walking through that door. And so it was more of a strength in numbers. I'll go back to what the 2015 Warriors, used to say.
Oh, man.
Yeah, a little throwback.
What a time.
There. And it's just strength in numbers, where we may not have the star-studded roster, guys that are going to, Biletnikoff winners, but we have to be really good as a unit. And what did that turn out to probably maybe not be as true as we thought that they would be? I think maybe that's more of the case as we're kind of getting through spring ball, because a lot of people have highlighted this. I know you've posted some clips about it, and we've just been so fortunate to just see the offensive line work each and every single day right there in front of us for an extended amount of time. Shout out Michael Bonnet. We do appreciate that. I'm being joking around, but in all seriousness, this offensive line, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I really do think they have like 8 or 9 guys that they could throw in there, and they're like, I don't think the drop-off is going to be massive. Now, look, when I say is it a concern, for me it is, just because losing Will Campbell, Emory Jones, and then all the guys in the middle, it's naturally, that's just what it is. And then DJ Chester really not being cemented as the starter, but has been doing a great job battling, Braylon Moore. So the offensive line for me is something that I've just kind of been paying attention to, because a lot of coaches say, okay, we've got 9 or 10 guys that we're going to go to, and what does that do? And you and I know some people like this, where it's like, okay, well, then you don't have anybody. It's like the old adage, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. And I think that while true to a certain extent, you want to have starters, you're not going to set your starting 5 in LSU's scenario where you're replacing nearly everybody in spring ball. You're going to jockey your guys around, you're going to see what you have, and then you're going to get into fall camp and start to establish kind of that 2 deep. And I think we've just seen that, hey, there's guys that are capable of handling themselves in terms of understanding what they're doing and understanding how to combo block up to a linebacker, which is something LSU has not done a great job at in terms of the run game. And that's that's interesting, whether it's a true freshman or whether it is a guy like Tyree Adams who's been around for some time. They have pieces to where now it becomes, we've got the talent, we just got to find the 5 guys. And I like that. And so I think that it's been an interesting storyline to watch. I know everyone's excited about a guy like Carius Kern, who I think is just at the very base value of who he is, like, let's just be real, this is the worst he will be in college. And he's pretty good. Like, he's been pretty impressive. And I think he's a guy who just puts his hand in the dirt and he can maul you in the run game, which LSU needs. Josh Thompson has been a guy they flexed out to tackle. They put at guard, and depending on what they have at tackle, and a guy like Weston Davis, who I think you posted about during Saturday's spring event. So I think it's just one of those things where they have a lot of interchangeable pieces, and now you got to figure it out. And then on the defensive side of things, I've said this multiple times, everyone's concern is DBU in the secondary, and I know you and I haven't been here long enough to truly appreciate in person those things, but we grew up watching those, right? Yeah. Like, we grew up watching these stars down here play, and while it has been some time since that has been true, I think that one thing I've seen is that I think the floor of this secondary is raised. I can't tell you what the ceiling is. I think that there's like a guy like DJ Pickett, who knows what his ceiling is as a player when you have that size and that frame and the weight he has put on. But I just think that bottom line, the floor has been raised with guys like Delane, with guys, Jakeem Jackson has been impressive at times. TaMarcus Cooley, Deshaun Spears kind of getting, more comfortable in year 2. Javian Toviano. Like, you just have guys that are maybe fitting better into where they need to be. Toviano's a great example of that. But, I just think the floor is better. I don't know how good this unit's going to be, but I don't think, and it's knock on wood, it's going to be as bad as it has been at times, or guys looking lost. And I feel like they're Corey Raymond, Blake Baker, Jake Olson to an extent. I feel like they've got a better idea of their personnel, and this is the personnel grouping they'd like to see out there. And so that's kind of been the two big things for me. And, there's tons of other options and tons of other things to look at. But I think secondary, the floor has been raised a little bit, and that offensive line, like, they've got to figure out the 5, but I like the crew that Brad Davis has brought in.
Yeah, they paid a lot of money to bring guys in to be the dudes, and I thought Delane looked really good in the live reps on Saturday. Some PBUs, some other things where he's covering one guy but instinctively comes off of that coverage and goes and makes a play and affects another route. Just little things that you may not see while the rep is going on, but when you watch it back, you pick on a couple of things. You pick out a couple of things.
Yeah.
I think he's a lock to be one of your corner starters right now, which is obvious because they paid him a bunch of money to come and be that guy. But it's nice to have one guy solidified who can hold that down. Mm-hmm. Now it's just a matter of determining the other spot and then the safeties as well. And I feel like that's the position group that has held this team down the past couple of years. Is the secondary. So it seems like they're making strides towards fixing that. Obviously, no question has a legitimate answer. Like last year, we thought the offensive line would just, return and be dominant. Yeah. And that wasn't the case. LSU was the worst running team in the SEC, and that's not all on the offensive line. Some of it's play calling, and some of it's just execution and who's running the ball and things like that. But you don't really truly know what you have until they get out there and play. So we could sit here and talk about losing 4 or 5 starters, the inexperience, things like that. But this could just be an offensive line that goes out and dominates. You know what I mean? In the season opener against Clemson. So I guess you just never know. What's maybe your biggest concern at this point?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I don't know how popular it is in terms of the talking points, which, look, it's talking season, right? We've got what, 2 months until SEC Media Days. It's always talking season for guys like you and me. We're just yapping constantly about everything. So I think the biggest concern is probably, and we talked a little bit about this, I'm still concerned about the safety spot because for me, and this is how I view it, John, is you got to prove it to me. And I think a lot of fans are at that point. Like, can you run fit well? Can you, when you get there, can you tackle? Can you cover? You mentioned with Delane, right, his instinction to be able to play, just you can't coach that. Like, he just has that, and that's what makes him a special player. It's what made him a hot commodity on the transfer portal market, and reason he kind of maybe looked at testing the NFL draft waters at one point. So I think that safety, you have guys who have the raw talent. Like, the service I work for, we rank these kids. We have guys that go out and watch them. I know you've gone out and watched a guy like Deshaun Spears. We've seen these guys grow and play. And now it's kind of a put up or shut up. It's kind of crazy to talk about a guy like Deshaun Spears, who 2 years ago we were like, okay, this guy's one of the top players in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of fans are like, okay, we need to know who you are now. That's a lot of pressure on that kid to kind of figure it out, where he was thrown into the fire last year. But safety to me is really boom or bust. If they don't figure it out, it's going to stress and put some big stress on that front seven. It's going to put some big stress on those corners you were talking about to maybe play outside of themselves. But if they hit, John, you're talking about a back end that if you got Delane on one side, that allows Pickett and it allows Ashton Stamps, who we haven't mentioned as he's an incumbent starter. It allows those other kind of 3 guys, Jakeem Jackson, Michael Turner Jr., who's looked really, really solid since he's switched over from receiver. It allows those guys to kind of fill in the domino effect and for them to kind of have their place. If they don't hit, I think it stresses a lot on Blake Baker and this defense. That's why it was so important for them to go out and get some guys. So safety to me is a little bit of a concern. And then interior defensive line. Okay. I think The portal opens up here, on the 16th, I think, of April. So
I feel like it's always open.
Yeah, it's always open. We got coaching changes happening.
It's always the legal tampering
period.
Jeez,
It's always the legal tampering period. I think for a lot of people, what was one of the biggest storylines? How capable was Sadir Mitchell going to be for this group? And I think you mentioned, I saw on Twitter or X, apologies.
I call it Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not calling it X. But you go to kind of there, and in terms of Sadir Mitchell, his capabilities. What was he going to provide? Well, I don't think he practiced on Saturday. You hope he had that injury, came back from it. You need him. You need some of those younger guys to step up, and it's a lot to ask. And I think they're really counting on the development aspect, which is, look, you're either going to go buy the guys or you're going to develop it. And obviously they felt good about adding Mitchell to what they had. That's the route they've decided to go, and so we'll see how it pans out.
I think they're looking pretty good. I was impressed by what I saw from Don McKinley and Ahmad Bro and Zion Williams, named to watch.
That's a big dude.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they weren't moving him.
Yeah. Brian Kelly said that he is, and I need to go talk to some scouting people about this, he's the definition of heavy-handed, where he's just once he gets a hold of you in terms of his, your pad, he's not letting go. It's hard to get off of him as an offensive lineman. Yeah, I guess a leech. Yeah. He's probably big. He's probably bigger than a leech at 355. But but I think just in terms of that, man, they've got some promise. It's just young guys got to perform and execute.
Yeah. Well, they had the spring to develop. They'll have fall camp to develop, and the time before that in the summer. So. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Can't really sit here and say that. People want answers now. We give them our best. I know you'll give them your best shot at those answers all summer. 247sports.com. Your socials are?
My socials, at Bryce_Koon. Very easy. At Bryce_Koon. You can find us over at Go247 LSU Tigers on 247 Sports. And, man, like I said, before you know it, we're going to be rolling into SEC Media Days in Atlanta. Then it's going to be that season opener against Clemson, which is – we'll have some time to talk about that one. That's a pivotal game here in 2025. So I'm excited for the season to start. Spring's just it's the appetizer, right, for what we get all summer and into the fall.
All right. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.